Hi everyone, here we go. The thing that we're thinking about is refuge. And refuge is this vast field of uncertainty all the time. So, in a way, we're just stepping into the mystery, or the clouds, or the mist, or the fog, or whatever we call it. But it's a marvelous thing, and so I'm looking forward to exploring that. And Alison wanted to explore that, so she's on too. Say hi, Alison.
Hola.
Right. So we just begin just by what's it feeling your life, feeling the time. We just got back from down south yesterday in Summerland, uh, and which is a marvelous place. But and when we came home, I just found myself walking around the garden and letting the trees say hello to me and saying hello to the trees and flowers and being in a conversation with them. And I think refuge is that we're always in some sort of communion with life. I suppose that's where I'm going with that tiny little story. The first three vows, which contain the rest, uh, I take refuge in awakening. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the way. I take refuge in the Dharma, the teachings, the way. I take refuge in my companions, the Sangha, the other people we're on the way with, In my case, including trees. Sometimes some people, some trees are, in a lot of cultures, are considered sacred. And one of the things people do sometimes in Japan is put elaborate knotted sort of ropes around them to indicate their connection, like plaited ropes, and so it's kind of like a ruckus wearing a robe for the tree to be part of the sangha. so yeah. So just feel the time. Feel what is it like to be you right now. What is it like to be sitting here? What is it like to be on the planet? One of the great things about meditation is that we start to notice, oh, we're here. And we don't have to complain about it. There's no need for an escape hatch. I don't know where we'd go with an escape hatch, through a wormhole to another galaxy that was exactly like this one, maybe. But there's no need. When we let go of thinking, we let go of having conditions. I suppose refuge is that we let go of having a provisional life. I'll agree to life as long as it, I don't know, gives me the person I want to live with, or changes the person I live with, or improves me, or gets rid of global warming, or gets more kindness in the world. I think no escape hatch means there's a kind of freedom, a tremendous freedom in that, in not disapproving of life. And refuge does that for us. I'm here no matter what. So let's just sit with it quietly for a minute. Together. And the silence hold us. And when I say feel the time and like feel your life, that's your Dharma. That's you. You're you. That you don't have to distract yourself at all. You're just here. And it's going to have to be good enough. And all the problems that you're going to fix or remember or list or run down your punch list or whatever. They don't matter right now. You're here. You don't have to be exercising and improving your fitness while you're meditating. You don't have to do any kind of list. Maybe you could listen to a meditation tape while you meditate. So you can tell that it's enough. The one thing is enough, And you can feel that. So once you feel the truth of that, then you kind of get what Refuge is about, really. So we were talking a bit about Refuge on the drive up Highway 101 yesterday, and past the, all the features, the what color is that ocean today, kind of thing, cerulean blue, perhaps, and then up through the Gaviota Pass, and then through, towns with funny names. There's a place called Coalinga on Highway 101, which you may know, but I was thrilled to find out. Actually, it used to be a coaling station, so it's Coaling Station A, Coalinga. And everybody's told me it's a Native American name, so it's kind of great. And things like that. So, and then, let's stop and get the cherries. But the cherry season was over. It was in full swing a couple of weeks ago when we went down. We'll get cherries on the way back. No, we won't. And that's the thing, which is so wonderful, really. And when that's life. We're just in it, right? We're just in it. And we had to stop every, I don't know, maybe hour for Alison to walk around, unstiffen her leg because she had surgery on her hip. And that was kind of nice too. We actually got a lot better at where to stop. Things like that. So refuge is, we're taking refuge in the here. So just to say that, so the here of your life, the ordinariness, the miraculousness of it, everybody's life in a way is miraculous. And that we all showed up here. Every now and again somebody sends me, I probably do that to you too, a photo of myself as a child, somebody, usually from Tasmania, trying to be helpful. And maybe it is. And I can tell that when I see that very small person, I can tell he's trying to, what am I doing here? He's trying to work it out. He's like a possum that strayed into the kitchen. Like, what's going on? And I felt there's a great little article about in various Midwestern states, people were very upset with beavers for destroying the trees. And so they captured lots of beavers and they parachuted them in to areas where there weren't any humans. So they figured, but there often weren't beavers. But those areas have now become much greener and more fertile. But I felt like a beaver parachuted in. So and you notice that there just isn't really a way. There isn't an exit hatch, and that it's not a very interesting thought that we need one, So, but I think we often have, we have, part of being human is to have complicated and multiple thoughts anyway, and that we. I was thinking of there's a famous story about a guy in Los Angeles who used to, in the middle of session, was famous to me anyway, used to pack up he said, I can't stand this anymore, this is mad, and he'd pack up his gear and move everything out of the Zendo and into his car, and then he'd sit in his car for an hour or two, and then he'd get out of his car, take his gear back, put it all back, and get back and sit in the Zendo. And I think refuge is kind of like that. I can't stand this, but hang on, I'm already doing it. It's like that we're already in a way, wanting to live the deepest and truest life we can. So I guess refuge is just not being phobic about noticing that, not being phobic about declaring that. And somebody I think who understands this stuff pretty well is Czesław Miłosz, who, the great poet who died, a couple of years ago. And he did a lot, Robert Haas did a lot of translation work with him, and he has a couple of really nice poems about that. And he was always wrestling with a couple of things. One is he didn't feel very virtuous, which is probably true, but but he didn't feel very virtuous according to his own rather strict Catholic standards, and falling in love with people and things like that. But then, and he also he kept wanting to make sense of things, but he didn't really believe that you could make sense of things. So he became a poet instead of an engineer. This one's called On Prayer. And so there's a kind of stance in Refuge, I think, of like openness to what comes. You ask me how to pray to someone who is not. All I know is that prayer constructs a velvet bridge, and walking it we are aloft as on a springboard above landscapes the colour of ripe gold. It's a nice notion for refuge. Above landscapes the colour of ripe gold. When we drove in yesterday, you could just smell the summer grass, the scented grass of summer in the hayfields, and just really great. The colour of ripe gold, transformed by a magic stopping of the sun. That bridge leads, where does it lead? It leads to the shore of reversal, where everything is just the opposite, and the word is unveils a meaning we hardly envisioned. It's like in Zen, what is Buddha? Is. He understood that sort of stuff, 3 pounds of flax, 3 kilos of flax. The word is unveils a meaning we hardly envisioned. Notice I say we. There everyone separately feels compassion for those entangled in the flesh, and knows that if there is no other shore, we'll walk that aerial bridge all the same. So that's another big thing about refuge is that's a we thing. It's something, it's an empathy for others. Sometimes hard to come by because they're just as bad as you. What are they thinking of doing that? Well, the same thing you're thinking of, So it's sort of rather fun, Oh yeah, I can't really blame them because whatever they're doing, I probably did at some stage in my life, So there's a rather nice empathy about refuge. It's about the communion of beings, and rather than the rules, And the rules are always going to come and go, and we're never sure which one to keep because they're always conflicting and things like that. But we can't just throw them out. So there's always a tension between. Always a tension between the feeling of wanting clarity and knowing what's the right thing to do before we do it. But then when we're in things and feeling our way, that slips around, slides around. So it's kind of hard. It's like, you can be in an argument. I'm very good at this. I can be in an argument knowing like all the facts are. Your lawyers say, if you can't get the facts, get the law. But I've got both the facts and what's right on my side, and then somehow I feel like, I don't know, the way I feel, I must be the one who's wrong in this argument, because I'm so right about it, and we can tell that that's a kind of possession in a way. I got possessed by the demon of being right, So I'm going to stop here and ask Alison. I don't know what you have to say.
I think the idea of the escape hatch, the mind grabbing for some kind of escape hatch from the moment that I'm in, and I guess the escape hatch is made up, it's constructed of all my objections to the moment I'm in, that I think of, this is what's wrong with what's happening right now. And the escape hatch is somehow some idea that I can change myself or change the world to get into some better universe that is not the one I currently find myself in. And also the marvelous idea that when we're born, there's like, that's the original no escape, where we just find ourselves here in this strange planet, in this strange body. And there doesn't seem to be any way out of being myself and being here. And so already we have the conditions for my own and the world's awakening. I can't turn away in some way. I can't leave this place. And already that's the condition of the bodhisattva. The bodhisattva is someone who decides to stay and not leave. And there's that beautiful rhyme with, that's our condition. We're here, and we haven't yet realized that we're the bodhisattva. We think we want to leave, but our conditions are such that we can't leave. And there's there comes a point where there's this beautiful helplessness in that we can't leave. We can't find some other planet where tigers don't rip animals apart and they've suddenly decided to become vegetarians, or that John said this very funny thing this morning. He said, even plants, the Venus flytrap has decided to give up its love of insects and become a vegetarian. Even plants will be vegetarians. So the idea of no escape, and to take refuge in awakening and in the way and in my companions is really a description of entering the moment that I'm in. But it doesn't always feel that way. You know, sometimes we feel this is the wrong. Someone is at fault. Someone did really hurt me and they shouldn't have done that. Or I really hurt someone. This is, I think, a harder one to bear for a human being, is to look back in memory and to see where I've hurt someone and someone I love. And that's, it's really hard to simply bear that without the defense of making myself wrong. In a way, if condemning myself is a kind of refusal of the experience of simply being here as things are. Yes, I was helpless in that situation in some way. I couldn't prevent, with my own good intentions and even my own commitment to someone that I love, I would not be able to prevent pain from occurring or myself from hurting or being hurt. And what happens with that dissolution of the defense of right and wrong is experience is a kind of dissolving of a kind of thick sort of wall, protective wall, like, the old medieval cities would have these walls around them. It would be my own city wall, the fiefdom of Allison, where that dissolves and the whole universe is, I'm helpless here, and all the forces of the universe will be at play. And a kind of, I'm going to say compassion is even a smaller word than it is, but it's It's a more immersion in the world. I'm with everyone. I'm not below everyone in the hell realms, condemning myself, and I'm not above people and condemning them. I'm with the suffering beings. And there's just a tremendous feeling of tenderness that comes with that experience. You know, a couple, as John said, I just had 2 weeks ago, I had hip replacement surgery, and the whole thing was so far beyond what in my naivete I had thought was going to occur. I thought it would be, I mean, I'd had surgery on my knees before, but it was arthroscopic and, you know, was really not that bad. But this was a whole nother measure of strangeness, and really took me into some dark and deep, watery. I told a few people it was like I was at the bottom of the Mariana Trench and no light could reach me, and nothing had yet come into form in the universe, and no sound could even reach me. I actually feel sorry for poor John, who took care of me during those first days. And I think I was somewhat out of my mind. For someone told me that she'd received a few text messages from me during that period. And she said, I could tell you weren't quite yourself. So there's, that would be, I think, the most extreme form of immersion in letting the world and the forces of the world hold us. And John was saying something earlier, you know, in our drive up, we were talking about refuge, and he said, you know, refuge, even before we have formally taken the vows of refuge, refuge has already taken us into itself. We're born into the field, the formless field of benefaction when we enter this world. And refuge is simply quietly waiting for us to recognize itself. And it's already holding us in our, as John says, you know, as he's a, what do you say, a possum or a beaver dropped into the center of the universe and sort of looking around. But the refuge and the benefaction is already holding us. It's in its regard, even when I'm at the bottom of the sea and I can't even write a simple text message to a friend, please bring me some fresh bread. And it gets all confused and it's strange. And the universe is having to hold the formless field of benefaction when I can't hold it myself, and I can't be in charge of not hurting people all the time. That's more than I can manage, or anyone can manage. So somehow hurting other people and being in pain has got to be a part of the field of benefaction. It's not something separate from, it holds within it those exchanges where we're one side, where we're the ones being in pain and injured when someone's in trouble, or I'm the one that's out of my mind for a moment or a year or a decade. And refuge is the other person's heart mind is holding me. So what else do I want to say about that? I think just to say one more thing, that awakening is always here and refuge is always here somewhere. So it's not in fixing my, the kind of, the cast of mind that is cruel or grabbing things, or that if I turn towards, I feel I absolutely have to have this now, no matter what the cost to the person that I'm yelling at right now or trying to coerce right now. Simply turning towards that, it's held inside the trouble itself, and that it unbinds itself. The forces at play will enlarge my own heart without me having to sort of turn that aggression towards myself to be a good person, or simply include the own activity of my own mind. And that, as John said, my companions are not just the people in my life. I mean, when I think of, my surgery, I think of my surgeon, who I saw a couple of days ago for my 2-week checkup. And I hadn't been in a car for 2 weeks, and I had seen virtually almost no one for 2 weeks. And we get in the car, and and first of all, the world looks very strange. And it's like all the trees and the freeway and everything, it was like all sort of like wild and sort of ruffled, like San Francisco Bay in a gale. It was like everything became white caps. And I get into my surgeon's office, and it's just Dr. Emerson and me. And my heart is so full of appreciation for him, what he had done for me, and that he'd spent his whole life like giving things up to learn how to do this, cut someone open and take a saw, all the things he's doing, and replace it with this beautiful, elegant titanium and porcelain, like Ferrari I have now in my body, which is just fantastic. And I go to thank him, and I start thanking him, and I've got tears in my eyes. And I can see Dr. Emerson is like, can't bear this amount of appreciation. And so I just sort of, rein it in a little and just thank him quietly. And that was it. So our companions. Anything else, John?
I was thinking of one thing I was thinking, well, why didn't I do Refuge, and then why did I do Refuge? And in a way, I think there's a part of my psyche always likes to stand off from things and have intelligent theories about them, and then there's another part of my psyche wants to stop that and join in with life, and I think that's just part. I think everybody's psyche, let's stay in control, or let's join in, or if I join in, let's do it in a controlled way. And I think for me, there was some trust in the tradition. These people had thought up all these amazing conversations, the amazing tradition of poetry and koans. And then they kept taking refuge, and so I thought, oh, well, I'll find out what it's like by taking it, And so I did, and I still didn't have a clue what it was like. But many years later, I realized I've sort of lived my way into it. It's like Rilke's advice to the young poet, you will live your way into the questions, and I suppose it was like that. And now it's not something I think about much, because sort of it's in my cells and things like that. And and the idea that I think the idea of knowing at a certain moment when we meditate, we just take refuge in the thusness and the thisness of life, and so that's the fundamental refuge, but then to do it with companions is kind of an interesting thing, because we're always with companions, really. Companions do, I don't know, everything. Surgery. They do surgery on us. They sue us. They help us. They instruct us in Japanese. They do all sorts of things. They help us give birth. They feed us. And so in a way, acknowledging that I can't make an exception. I'm always going to be in control with my companions either. So I know I'm not in control with the great mystery, and so the uncontrollability of life is being acknowledged with refuge, I think. Things that we can't know already. And so my decision was sort of existential, I suppose. I thought, well, I don't really understand what this is about. And it doesn't seem to have improved a lot of the people who took it who are in my community, but which is that me standing back, and being a snob about things like that. But and being skeptical of belief, I suppose, really. But then at some stage realizing an existential act is not about belief. It's somehow opening myself to the true life. So that when you decide, somebody asks you something, you kind of know the answer. It's not picking and choosing.
To some friends and teachers the other day about my taking refuge, and I did not take refuge for many years. I actually became a teacher before I took refuge, and I got curious about that. What was that that resistance? And it was specifically in refuge, it was my feeling of not wanting to join a group. There was a defense that I had, that a kind of arrogance that that I would never, stoop to being a Girl Scout or being whatever the group was, that I wouldn't join something. And it was an arrogant sort of stance. And really, it was nothing to do with the group or joining. It was my fear of being part and immersed and being defenseless and not having my sense of that I'm smarter than, or I won't be caught like that. It was a kind of coyote around the edge of the fire, not joining in. And joining in, saying yes, was saying yes, I'll be part of things. I'll let people see me. That was a really the felt sense of it. And when we were driving home yesterday, we were looking at cars, and there's the colors of cars, and there's a kind of Tesla that has this weird black that's very dull, and it looks like it sucks light into it. I think it's a super high-end kind of stealth kind of color for a car. You never see it anywhere. And John asked me, well, how would you describe this color? And I said, well, it's a car that does not want to join into the family of cars. I thought, yeah, that was me.
The temple bell. It's been ringing for centuries. Each moment spreads out, and we take refuge in it, in the sound, without having opinions about it, really. Refuge takes me. And so much about life we don't have a choice about. And so much just comes through us and pours through us. So much of what we think of as our personality is just, I don't know what's going on, but it's like the Tao comes forth through us. And maybe it doesn't, and we're taking refuge in that. We're trusting that. We're saying, oh, I'm walking this path and I don't have a fixed destination. I don't know when I'm going to arrive. but I can feel it's a true path, and that's the important thing. And if I'm not making mistakes, I know I'm not walking the path. So there is that. And if I'm blaming mistakes, I know that's more worse yet. And yeah, then I'll be blaming others, and pretty soon it's just hopeless. But then, even when it's been hopeless, here I am. I take refuge. I take refuge. I take refuge. Sanctuary. I think I've gradually discovered the importance of not only having a vessel, but being in a vessel and being on the path, since I don't know, whatever, rebelling against the Catholic Church or whatever it was. As a culture, the United States is incredibly good at rebelling against things, but not always very good at understanding the value of form and the value of containment, The sonnet can be a very good form, yes, like that. Blank verse, it's all right. So I think regardless of our culture, I think it's nice to be held in a way that connects us to each other, and through which we communicate with each other.
Something you just said about the Tao holding us, and that there can feel like there'll be these intractable problems and sufferings in one's life that it feels like no matter how much effort or that I place in this area, in this situation, the trouble with my brother or my parents might not even be alive anymore. It might still be an intractable problem, but that the Tao has its own timing. And that's a beautiful thing too. I take refuge in not my own personal demands on how, when, and how this should be resolved, but that to know that I'm on the path is to know that even these seemingly intractable problems have their own timing, like spring and winter. It has its season that's larger than my ability to control things. And there's a relinquishment of my demands in some way that softens the boundaries around the trouble, that I think is a beautiful part of having a practice and taking refuge.
Thanks, that's great. Alison's has been a friend of mine for a long time, but one thing I always valued about her as a friend, I'd get mad about saying, they, blah, 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 and she'd say, in front of everybody, but you do that. And it's incredibly and it was always true. And I was about to, or I had done it yesterday or something. And in a way, but there's no blame. It's a refuge just like that. There's no blame, and we're in this together. And it's kind of beautiful, actually. John Joseph, do you have anything to say about such matters?
Child emergency. In talking with friends and teachers a few days ago about refuge, what struck me was from the position of a teacher, what's the experience like? And how my approach to refuge has changed over the years, and particularly in recent years in working with people on developing their own koan-like responses to the various vows. And we go deeper and deeper and deeper into the vow as we would a koan, but then the universe is also changing over this period of time. And so we're getting this freshness and this moment by moment by moment, and it's really a wonderful thing from on this side of the cushion as well. So that's what I was thinking about over the last couple of days.
Well, I think as a teacher, usually, actually, I don't do this so much now, but I always went in thinking, well, I know what this is, and I can help this person understand what I know, whatever it is. But all that's drivel, because we're going to discover together. I'm going to change and develop too, because there are always different mistakes and different discoveries, and it's a discovery process. And I think the thing about awakening, that's the awakening part of it. It's wrong to think there's a place I arrive at and don't keep moving. I think you're touching on that with the field between us is amazing, and also there's no right and wrong. There's absolutely no judgment about any of that.
Let's hear from Jordan.
I think the first time I'd heard of Refuge, I didn't know it was a thing. And I was looking around for a teacher or people to meditate with here in Winnipeg, and the options were pretty limited. But there was a Tibetan guy who, there's one Tibetan teacher here that isn't actually Tibetan, but he's in that lineage. And then there was a real Tibetan guy who was teaching meditation. So I got a hold of somebody that knew him or was in his group. And she said, oh yeah, well, you can come down and you meet the teacher and he'll give you refuge. And then you can sit with him. I was like, I don't like the sounds of this. This guy's going to give me refuge? What does that even mean? Never called them back. And spent a couple of years kind of looking around until eventually I landed here with you guys. And then thinking about Refuge, it just seemed like this totally natural thing to do. Like, of course I would do that. And I don't know, if I think about it, I think my personality would tend more towards like, that sounds a little too much like religion to me. But there was something about it that just felt right and natural to kind of do that. And I was lucky because right when I started thinking about it, Allison and Jesse and Tess were doing a whole series about Refuge. So we did one of the vows every week for, I don't know, what are there, 13 weeks, something like that. Maybe we didn't do quite all of them, but anyways, it was sort of a long extended thing. And so we went through all of them and I had all these notes, and it was really, it's a really beautiful thing, just sort of exploring all these vows with everybody, and kind of everybody would sort of bring something to the table, their reaction to the vows, and it got really, really intimate and personal. And one thing I remember Allison always saying was that I found really helpful was whenever you are sitting with a vow or being with a vow and there's tension in your life, that's where you enter. You enter with that feeling of like tension with that vow. And so maybe I'll wrap up with this. I had all these notes written down in the shop. It's just like scattered around the workshop. And when it came time to actually write out my vows, I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. And I just went around and gathered up all these scraps of paper that I had stuff written on. I started looking at them. And this was, I don't know, a couple months later, maybe longer, more time had passed than that possibly. But none of the notes made any sense to me whatsoever. I couldn't make hide nor hair of them. And that was worrisome because I didn't have that much time to get this done. But I also thought it was really interesting because it really showed me like how these vows do change in the moment for people, or as your life sort of progresses. They're different from moment to moment. And so I was working on them with JJ for quite a while, it felt like, and I had all this stuff written out, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this story. I thought it was pretty funny, but we'd gotten to the I vow not to misuse drugs. And for me, that vow's about alcohol. I played in a band for a long time, beer drinking, rock and roll guy. And I'd written this big long thing out, and JJ just kind of, I read it to him and he just kind of sat there, and then he goes, "I'll just be honest with you. It sounds like you're trying to write a pamphlet for Alcoholics Anonymous." And I knew he was totally right. It was this funny, like, I don't know what happened, but I had this, like, the word that comes up for me is like sanctimonious. I had this funny idea that these vows needed to be like, I don't know, somehow like treated like they're out there, and I need to make it flowery and beautiful, and like a sermon or something like that, or like an Alcoholics Anonymous pamphlet, some kind of ideal thing of like, this is some kind of, like, I'm putting it on a pedestal out here, and it's this sacred thing. And so I kind of laughed when JJ said that. And then I said, well, what should I talk about? Shitting my pants on a rickshaw in India, which wouldn't mean anything to you, but it was actually a poignant event in my life. And as I said it, JJ just kind of looked at me, and I looked at him, and that felt alive all of a sudden. That wasn't the vow out there being this thing of flowery language. It was like this thing that all of a sudden was in me and a part of me. And so that all of a sudden, all the vows kind of opened up in that way. And it was easy to kind of step into that. Maybe that's all I want to say.
Jesse, do you want to say anything? Thank you, Jordan. It's where it's alive. I like that. That's good. Jesse, do you want to say anything or not? You get a no if you want.
Sure, yeah. Well, Jordan's story about writing the alcohol vows reminds me of an email interchange between you and I, John, probably like, 10 years ago or something. We're doing koans over email, and I gave some response, and you said, "Fair enough, next koan, ? And I wrote back, "Well, wait, what do you mean fair enough? Did I get it or not?" And you just wrote back, "Don't be such a fucking Puritan." And I laughed and laughed, because that's like one of the places that I take refuge. Am I smart enough? Am I good enough? Did I get it right? It was such a relief to actually be called on that, and it's like it gave me permission to just, not take refuge there anymore. And the other thing is, right after the meditation, I turned off my camera because I had to go use the bathroom, and I think I shouldn't have to use the bathroom. I think I should sit through the whole thing and wait. But the reality is I need to use the bathroom. So this is an incredibly simple thing about just taking refuge in what's here. Well, I don't know. Is that the right thing? Is that okay? Is that acceptable? What will people think? What will I think? Well, those are all the places, just sort of the false refuges in a way that I try to rest in, that are never really comfortable. They're never really free. They never really get me anywhere except around and around in a circle. And so it's a remarkable thing to throw ourselves off the top of the 100-foot pole and to take refuge in just what's here. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Tenny, do you want to, I noticed you've arrived, and do you want to say anything?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. One thing I noticed is that people's stories about why they didn't take refuge seem to be sort of deeply revealing. And I remember going to retreats a long time ago up at St. Dot's with John, and also my teacher, Joan Sutherland. And there were lots of refuge ceremonies. And I had read this thing about how you were not allowed to take refuge until you'd had a big kensho, So I remember feeling sort of weirdly humiliated, like hundreds of people are sort of going through. They must have had these instantaneous big openings, and then even after I figured out that must be not true, it's like, it's going to be true for me. I won't take refuge until that happens. And so the characterological thing there is, it's like it looks like humility, but it's like a deep sort of sense of pride in some way. That's not very useful. So there's that. Finally got to take refuge many years later, because open source hadn't done one for a long time, and a lot of us went through the ceremony together, and we were surprised at how much it felt like saying yes to things, including ourselves as as a sangha, so people wandered around saying, oh, I feel like I just got married, and the kind of depth of that and the intimacy of it was quite surprising. And then just a couple other things pretty quickly. So I also certainly identify with what Allison was saying about that sense of, a lot of times feeling like I need an exit or I've already taken an exit. And so especially the beginning parts of the precepts are kind of along the lines John was talking about that just, oh, you're already in it. So useful kind of thing. I remember also John a long time ago used to say that if you're working with a koan, whatever you meet, that's the koan. And as part of my own practice, and also if I'm leading a refuge group, for the 3 refuge vows, it's really quite wonderful to sort of walk around with each one of those separately for a few days. If you walk around with, I take refuge in awakening, and everything you meet is the refuge in awakening, and you're seeing awakening all around you, the world has a certain feel to it. And then if you do, I take refuge in the way, which, or the Tao or the way, which I think of as not only the teachings, but just the unfolding of things over time, everything looks really different, and it's really beautiful. And then to walk around again with I take refuge in my companions, there's again a different feel to them. And then finally,
Tenny, thanks.
Okay.
I think you did it. I think you did it. Very good. Jan, I wanted to get other people in. Jan Brogan, do you want to?
Well, it was a little poignant with Jordan talking about taking his vows, since I sat next to him when he recited that vow about being in the rickshaw. It was quite something. I think for me, the vows, I think the idea of the container, that's very important, feels real. And the vows come to me at different times. Like one will be more present. Every time I cry. the vow of our community really is, for me, every day. I feel that. Thank you.
Very good. There's a kind of marvelous total thing about a vow, because it's kind of silly in a way, because you're here and life is it. Life is here. Yeah. Another way to make it conscious, there's always that thing. It's nice to make it conscious. And in a way, you're also saying my shadow, everything, we try to make conscious our shadow, whatever it is, And it's probably one of those things in the, sex, drugs, and rock and roll department, so, or unkindness or something, unkindness, maybe bullying, whatever it is. And so, in a way, it's not a matter of like disapproving, but of as things become conscious, then I don't know, they change. If you notice you're a bully, and then you might gradually, it might not be so much fun anymore as it was when you were pretending you weren't and bullying people anyway, that kind of thing, So, or if desire is your thing and you just look at everybody and want to go to bed with them, whatever it is, as you sort of acknowledge, oh, that's what kind of person I am, then you're not that kind of person so much anymore. And in fact, you're never any kind of person, really, Or if you're just full of envy and you just envy other people's achievements all the time and say, I'm as good as that, When you stop doing that, you can just enjoy people. So sort of like that including the shadow and embracing the shadow as part of it. I take refuge. I take refuge. I take refuge.
I take refuge in awakening. I take refuge in the way. I take refuge in these companions.
The quiet bits are really nice, eh? No one talking about refuge is great. The I was thinking, a couple of stories came to my mind. Like, temples were always refuges, and have always been refuges. There's a great one in China where this guy turned up on the lam and took refuge in this temple, and nobody knew who he was except the abbot knew him, and he was in the royal imperial family, and he was the next in line for the throne, but there was a new emperor had just been appointed, just appeared because his previous successor had died. The previous emperor had died, and this new emperor wanted to kill him just in case anybody thought he should do a coup, and so he took, because he was a disturbing influence, so he took refuge in the temple, and the Roshi just, said, well, he called everybody in and said, that new person who came in? Everybody said, yeah. Well, you don't know anything about him. We're not going to talk about that. Everybody said, okay, something up, but that's good. We're gonna be loyal to that. And then the abbot just treated him like anyone else, and gave him a koan, and he worked in the fields and things like that, and started doing koan study. And the abbot didn't care how he got there. It's like he's now a Zen student, and it's kind of sweet. And then after some years, the emperor, the hostile emperor, died. Where's the guy who went into hiding? We've got to find him because he's now emperor. And the word came to the temple eventually, and the guy said, is it okay if I just stay here and don't go to the palace and run the country? And the Roshi said, well, I just think it's your karma and it's your fate. And so you've taken refuge, and that will now be your refuge. So kind of sweet story. And I think people can, there was another Japanese story this time where if a woman wanted, she had a powerful husband and he didn't want her to get a divorce, and she wanted a divorce and things like that. All she had to do was get a shoe over the wall of the monastery and they would accept her in. She could take refuge. It's a rather wonderful thing. She just had to throw a shoe over the wall, and it doesn't matter how many soldiers were chasing her to bring her back. They couldn't bring her back. So refuge has many forms. And even when you don't take it in a way, you take it, you just hear of it. It's like Zazen. If you just hear of it, you've already done it.
Give me a rhythm, give me a rhyme, some song to guide me, or just pass the time. Bring me refuge, oh, bring me a bed, a pillow of images to cradle this head. I vow to wake all the beings of the world. I vow to set endless heartache to rest. I vow to walk through every wisdom gate. I vow to live the great Buddha way. I vow to wake all the beings of the world. I vow to set endless heartache to rest. I vow to walk through every wisdom gate. I vow to live the great Buddha way. I vow to wake all the beings of the world. I vow to set endless heartache to rest. I vow to walk through every wisdom gate. I vow to live the great Buddha way. I vow to live the great Buddha way.
Awesome. Thank you.